What do you make of those numbers, and to what extent does this silence the critics, at least for one quarter?
I think what we can see from the results is that the company is able to drive growth along several different areas.
Yes.
So the iPhone, the execution in that business was solid. I think the growth in services shows that Apple has really built out a differentiated ecosystem that customers value. When we think about what they're doing with the watch and other things, there's still a lot of innovation here. And then lastly, I would point out we obviously saw the big increase to the stock buyback and the dividend. This is a company that's very shareholder friendly and very focused on the long term. And so we like what we see.
Yeah, that's $100 billion in share repurchases to add to the $210 billion buyback program to be completed in the fiscal third quarter. Thank you, tax reform.
Absolutely. Mark, how about you? What's your headline from this number?
Well, it's kind of what we talked about at the beginning of the show, which is we saw a top line number that had a 5 in front of it. That was good.
Yeah.
Obviously, the restraint on the below the line I thought was terrific as well. I think the growth of accessories clearly is the driver going forward of the model, and I think you also saw the buyback, which is clearly something financially that shareholders are happy to see. I think this is a bellwether stock. Obviously, we saw the same kind of price reaction in Amazon and Facebook. What does it tell you? We are too fearful of technology stocks going into quarters, and a lot of people got caught on the wrong side, and I think you're going to see that in the action tomorrow like we've seen in the aftermarket today.
Daniel, talk to me about the services segment. I mean, we've got services revenue up 31% from a year ago, and we're talking a sequential growth in services that contrasts with the sequential decline, basically, in every other segment. I mean, we can't get away from that. The services is the real growth generator now for Apple.
Sure. So when one looks at the services business, in particular the App Store, what you're seeing is that Apple is attracting developers to write applications, and users are downloading them and paying for them where they see value. And so I think the ability to bring together the app developers and the users on their platform is powerful. And then, of course, you have Apple increasingly getting users to sign up for more iCloud storage, as an example. We heard about music a little bit earlier. And so there are a number of things underneath that are growing and we think can contribute nicely over time.
And Tim Cook said that to Emily Chang, and we heard that there. The company now has 270 million paying subscribers. That's 100 million more than a year ago.
I think that's right, and I think when one thinks about the install base of over 1 billion devices,
yes,
we're actually relatively early in the services story. Now, Apple's a big company, and it does take quite a lot to move the needle, but I think the 31% growth of what is actually a very big business speaks to the fact that there is more left here as we think about the next few years.
$30 billion business now.
Massive business. Mark, on this idea of the gigantic Apple installed base out there, could you see this trajectory continue for a while where it's like, okay, yeah, you're not getting that many new people into the Apple ecosystem, but the Apple ecosystem is so big and so immovable that they just ramp up that monthly subscription revenue, whether it's iCloud, whether it's App Store, whether it's magazine and news subscriptions, and just really crank that number up, and that becomes where the entire story is, really?
Well, we talked about the top line iPhone number. It's the best razor blade model of all time, although they're selling $700 razors as opposed to $5 razors. So I think it's really a growth story like you describe over time, where they're just going to have so many touch points within the consumer for all different demographics and all different geographies that will become that install base. The beauty of this product is that over time globally, it has garnered the #1 perception amongst consumer that it is the best device. That's obviously, I think, a truthful statement. It's also perception. And I think it's very, very hard to change. Very, very hard to change your device. If you look around the room and talk to your colleagues, how many of them change their device and switch from Apple to something else? It's in a small handful, at least in my world. And I think over time that will continue, and that will drive the services revenue over time, and we will continue to see margin expansion based on those products.